upon the Dutch East Indies. The Japanese naval air raiders neither shot down the Imperial headquarters at 11:50 o'clock Sunday morning, announced that 12 enemy planes were annihilation of 2,000 Chunking camps. According to a dispatch from Washington, President Roosevelt in his interview with the press Friday clarified the attitude of the United States regarding the execution of the war in the Pacific. He commented on the British military strategy and said that it was always too late and too little. We see this comment. This is Radio Tokyo, bringing you the seventh of a daily series of the American War Prisoners Information. Our list for today will include the officers who had surrendered on Guam Island. In giving out this information, I shall repeat the name twice, then the rank, and the service to which they were affiliated at the time of their capture. This will follow with the address and the name of the persons to whom the message is directed, and lastly, the message itself. And the first message for this evening is from Schwartz, Jack William Schwartz, capital S-C-H-W-A-R-T-Z. Schwartz, Jack William Schwartz, age 26, of the United States Naval Reserve. His rank is lieutenant of the junior grade. His address, 409 Cloverdale Avenue, Los Angeles, California. The message is to Mrs. Jenny Schwartz, his wife, of the same address. Dearest, darling Jenny, I know you must all be worried about me, but I am safe and in good health. So please do not worry anymore. I am in a camp in southern Japan, and we are being treated better than you and I thought. I lost a little weight at first, but have not been sick and do not expect to be. I hope that the allotments went through so that you have enough money to get along on. The food we get is adequate, but if there is any way for you to send me anything, I would like some books, candy, and canned meat. All our possessions are in Guam, except your picture and penelope, which I brought with me. As I can only send one message, I know you will tell Mother I am well. When the war is over and we are together again, we will get a new start together. And I am sure that it will be as wonderful as the first. I hope all of you keep well and happy. Incidentally, I did not get seasick on the trip to Japan. I love you, darling, and hope it will not be too long till I see you again. Your loving Jack. And our second message, and the final message for this evening, is from William, Richard Bland Williams, Jr. Richard Bland Williams, Jr., age 26, of the United States Navy, Guam. His rank is lieutenant, junior grade of the Medical Corps. His address is 665 Easy Street, Saltville, Virginia. 665 Easy Street, Saltville, Virginia. The address is to Mrs. R.B. Williams, Mrs. R.B. Williams, wife of the same address. Anyone hearing this message, please contact R. Howard Bland, Chairman of the Board of the United States Fidelity and Guarantee Company, Baltimore, Maryland. And the message is, Dear Thelma, am a prisoner of war in Japan, well treated and in good health. Give my love to my sister, to cousin Manny, cousin Howard, and family, and to Aunt Louise. Be of good cheer. We will have a second honeymoon in Dansbury when the war is over. Love, Bland. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the American War Prisoners information for this transmission, which has been under speedy deliberation in the 79th session of the Imperial Diet, will be approved by both. Yesterday, on the Second Imperial Incheck Day, concerning the decorated armed bombers at dawn Sunday, carried out fierce air raids upon the Rangoon air. This air raids upon the Dutch East Indies. The forces that occupied Moulmein in Burma captured one airplane. Situation from January the 6th, Berlin. Surabaya was fiercely bombed by Japanese flying squadrons on February the 5th for the second term against the Dutch East Indies government. Commenting on the naval battle in the Java Sea, these dispatches emanating from Batavia and Lisbon give new testimony to the extent the Dutch East Indies have been touched by their main units of the naval and air arm during the course of the Japanese air attack on February the 3rd over Surabaya and Maran, when more than 80 Allied warplanes were destroyed. The following day saw the blinding attack carried over the Allied fleet on Java Sea, and the naval power of the Netherlands Asiatic Squadron was virtually smashed following a lightning blow administered in the space of a few hours. Whatever claims the Allied command may have advanced as to their potential strength at Java is today an echo of another day. Today the armed forces of Japan now control the air and sea over the very bases that General Weibo had boasted as impregnable. The fate that come upon the Dutch East Indies was foretold when Japan formally opened its attack on the Dutch colonial defense on January the 12th. No one can deny the glaring miscalculation of the Dutch leaders in witnessing the downfall of their policy of dependence on the Anglo-American strategy only 24 days after Japan's decision to wipe out the mistaken notion entertained by the leaders at Batavia. Manila. A Batavia radio admitted the complete occupation of the Union. Somewhere in Malaya, Japanese tactics have completely terrified the British. Two British lieutenant generals who were lately captured by the Japanese revealed. The British thought that the Japanese would make landing operations at Kuantan on the eastern coast of Malaya, and never considered the possibility that the Japanese would dare to brave the wild jungles of northern Malaya, the two British lieutenant generals sadly disclosed. The sudden appearance of the Japanese forces from the least expected direction scared the 2,000 white soldiers under these two lieutenant generals who thought they were seeing living ghosts. By the time we're taking prisoners, there were only 530 soldiers. From the war front in central China, but the annihilation of 2,000 United States Navy Department, according to information from Washington, was smashed Saturday by Japanese bombardment from land and air, while other bomber formations battered 7 trucks and blasted ammunition dumps at the American positions on the Bataan Peninsula. Meanwhile, information from Buenos Aires indicates that the United States War Department admitted best Japanese operations against United States and Filipino troops, adding that the war theater on the Bataan Peninsula is moving southward. The United States War Department also revealed that Japanese artillery fiercely shelled the Kahida fortress from the southern bank of Manila Bay for 3 hours on Saturday. And that, ladies and gentlemen, ends your news for this hour. And also the second transmission of the day is that Broadcasting Corporation, quoting a Dutch East Indies communique, announced the communique also revealed that Japanese planes also raided Montauk, on the northeastern tip of the neighboring island of Bangka, causing several fires in the town of Montauk. Meanwhile, other Japanese flying corps attacked Palembang in Sumatra, destroying several planes on the ground. According to the British Broadcasting Corporation, spot intercepted in Shanghai and Hofan in North China. Crossing the Chongqing remnants under Yushui-chung and the Yishui sector in southern part of Shantung province, Japanese forces succeeded in shattering enemy's headquarters at Tatsing-1, 25 miles north of Yishui, Saturday night. The Japanese are now vigorously driving from all directions toward Yishui to mop up the Chinese remnant. Lisbon. Reports from Washington. A large-scale mass demonstration against the British government took place recently at Lahore, chief city in Punjab, India. The demonstration was quelled after 100 Indian leaders were arrested, according to an Australian radio report intercepted at Saigon Sunday. The riot at first started as a parade protesting against the new sales tax imposed by the British authorities as a wartime measure. However, the parade developed into riot, with the paraders later exchanging blows with the police authorities, the Australian radio disclosed. Revealing that the disturbances were primarily directed against the British business establishment. From a certain base, powerful squadrons of Japanese army bombers at dawn Sunday carried out fierce air raids upon the Rangoon airfield. Editorially commenting on the naval battle in the Java Sea, down 78 enemy planes in Dutch East Indies and Burma. The Imperial headquarters announced at 12:20 o'clock Monday afternoon, about 25 minutes ago. On Saturday and Sunday, Japanese Army flying squadrons raided Palembang and shot down 50 planes on Saturday and 17 others on Sunday. Meanwhile, on Saturday, Japanese Army air raiders, in their bombing raid over the Ningaladong airfield in Burma, shot down 11 RAF machines and planes. And now we'll continue with your program. Now, next on the list is Richard Bland Jr. Williams, age 26, of the United States Navy at Guam. His rank, Lieutenant, Junior grade. Medical Corps. His address, 665 East Street, Saltville, Virginia. His message is directed to Mrs. R.B. Williams, Donald Warren Bonham, age 31, of the United States Navy at Guam. His position, Chief Radio Man. His address, Independence, Oregon. His message is directed to Mrs. Bonham, his wife, of the same address. Mrs. Bonham, I'm unharmed, warm and healthy. My allotments should continue. Buy and sell whatever you wish. Return my guitar. Please send me the watch spring and family snapshots. Desire thick fishy and canned meat concentrates. I hope Richard enjoyed his choo-choos and toys. Keep everyone cheerful and healthy. Devoted love, Don. Now the next one is Baggett, Ralph Newell Baggett. Age 23, the United States Marine Corps at Guam. His rank, Private First Class. His address, 250 Texas Avenue, Jackson, Mississippi. His message is directed to Mrs. S.S. Baggett, mother, of the same address. Dearest Mama, I'm now in Japan, a war prisoner, and I'm unhurt, being well treated, and hope to be home soon. Don't worry about me, as I'm perfectly safe. Notify the rest of the folks. Love, Ralph. Now the last one is Bagwell, Woodrow Latin Bagwell. Age 21, of the United States Marine Corps at Guam. His rank, Private First Class. His address, 111 North Milby, Houston, Texas. His message is directed to Mrs. Izora Bagwell, his mother, at the same address. His message reads, Dear Mother, I'm a prisoner of war in Japan. I'm well and unharmed. Please don't worry about me.
and let Nina Ruth know. Love, Woodrow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes today's portion of the American War Prisoners' information. The same names and messages will be repeated today following the newscast at 6:30 GMT. GMT.
This is the Broadcasting Corporation of Japan in Radio Tokyo in the overseas 6 transmissions. Radio Tokyo is operating in the 25. In Tokyo, it is from Radio Tokyo. The Japanese have landed on Singapore Island. The Japanese forces started offensives against Singapore Island following the successful crossing of the Johor waterway. The Imperial headquarters announced in a communique issued at 5 o'clock this afternoon. The communique declares that the Japanese forces operating in Malaya, in defiance of the enemy resistance, have since Sunday succeeded in crossing the Johor waterway and started direct offensive against the British stronghold of Singapore Island. Meanwhile, field dispatches from Johor Bahru, opposite Singapore Island, indicate that the Japanese succeeded in landing on the island of Singapore at points facing Johor Bahru at 12:16 o'clock this morning, Monday. From the Singapore front, the Japanese forces which succeeded in landing on the island of Singapore shortly after midnight Sunday, are now extending their military operations. Unit after unit, the Japanese forces landed at points in the northern part of the island opposite Johor Bahru. The Japanese units are now reported to be driving toward a certain hill in the central part of the island, shattering the resistance of the British troops. Frightened by the Japanese surprise landing, the British troops are fleeing toward the central highway along the roads east of the Tenga airdrome. Here, Japanese artillery bombardments from points near Johor Bahru are inflicting crushing damage upon the retreating British troops. Revealing for the first time the name of the Supreme Commander of the Japanese Army Forces in Malaya, a communique issued by the Imperial Headquarters at 5 o'clock this afternoon declared that Lieutenant General Tomoyuki, better known as Hogun Yamashita, is commanding the Imperial Army Forces in the Malay and Singapore sector. Lieutenant General Yamashita, last year when he was Director General of the Military Aviation, visited Germany and Italy and returned here following the outbreak of the German-Soviet War. From Shanghai. According to reliable information, the British government has decided to dispatch naval and air forces to reinforce the defense of Singapore, but the dispatch of army forces has not yet been decided. However, it is said that the British authorities have no hopes of success regarding the future of Singapore, and that the sending of these reinforcements are mainly for the purpose of defending Australia. It is further observed that the maximum force which Britain can put up from the African front for Australia will be only 2 divisions and 500 airplanes. Shanghai. The casualties sustained by the Australian Army in the Malay front are said to be very considerable, as it was placed on the very first front throughout the campaign. A dispatch from New Delhi indicates. A total of the casualties known up to February 5th is regarded as much larger than that of those sustained by the Australian forces both in Greece and Crete put together. Fearing that a knowledge of the real situation may perturb the official and civilian circles in Australia, War Minister Francis Ford is trying his best to cover up the real figures of the damages by announcing them merely as 183 dead, 359 wounded, and 645 missing. Japanese Army planes shot down 78 enemy planes over the Dutch East Indies and Burma. The Imperial Headquarters announced at 12:20 o'clock Monday afternoon. On Saturday and Sunday, Japanese Army flying squadrons raided Palembang in eastern Sumatra and shot down 50 planes on Saturday and 17 on Sunday. In Burma, Japanese Army air raiders Saturday in their bombing raid over the Mingaladon airfield shot down 11 RAF machines and planes, the Imperial Headquarters announced. Continuing with a war bulletin from Tokyo. From a Japanese air base in Malaya. Japanese Army aircraft sweeping over Sumatra in complete defiance of the Dutch East Indies Air Force shot down or destroyed on the ground 67 enemy aircraft in their raids upon Palembang and Pakambaro. in southern Sumatra on February 7th and 8th, thus virtually annihilating the remaining Dutch airplanes and frustrating the enemy Air Force's attempts to reinforce the British in Singapore Island. A dramatic air combat took place over Berhala Straits, 200 kilometers south of Singapore on the afternoon of February 7th, when a Japanese fighter squadron shot down 4 of the 6 Blenheims, which attempted to intercept the Japanese, and in this air combat, the cracked Japanese fighters trifled with the British Blenheims as if the children played with toys. Next from Shanghai. The airfields in the northern part of Rangoon were severely bombed Sunday night by Japanese air forces. Reported a Rangoon dispatch adding that the raid was a 5th night attack. From a Japanese undisclosed base in Burma. Imperial Japanese Army planes operating in Rangoon and Rattabon regions early Monday morning released air dreadnoughts to put the final squeeze upon a large number of enemy forces retreating along the right bank of the Salween River, and reduced the enemy position and the retreat to complete shambles. The Japanese Army planes in this operation sustained no loss, it was confirmed. From a Japanese base, Japanese Navy planes sank a large type enemy transport in the Gaspar Strait between Bangka Island and Belitung Island in the western Java Sea on Sunday. The transport was escorted by a destroyer. By destroyers, it was added. News dispatches emanating from Batavia and Lisbon give mute testimony to the extent the Dutch East Indies have been crushed of their main units of the naval and air arm during the course of the Japanese air attacks on February 3rd over Surabaya and Malang, when more than 80 Allied warplanes were destroyed. The following day saw the blinding attack carried over the Allied fleet on the Java Sea, when the naval power of the Netherlands Asiatic Squadron was virtually smashed following a lightning blow administered in the space of a few hours. Whatever claims the Allied command may have advanced as to their potential strength at Java is today an echo of another day. Today, the armed forces of Japan now control the air and sea over the very bases that General Wavell had boasted as impregnable. The fate that came upon the Dutch East Indies was foretold when Japan formally opened its attack on the Dutch colonial defense on January 12th. No one can deny the glaring miscalculation of the Dutch leaders in witnessing the downfall of their policy of dependence on the Anglo-American strategy only 24 days after Japan's decision to wipe out the mistaken notion entertained by the leaders at Batavia. The fictitious news of the so-called naval victory at Makassar, spread by Anglo-American powers, have melted into oblivion like soap bubbles when accurate news were flashed to the world reporting the destruction of the main force of the United States Dutch combined fleet by the Japanese Navy in the waters off Java. The Makassar naval battle was a mere imaginary novel written by the enemy in order to cover up their continued defeats. Now it is clear, like broad daylight, that not only this Makassar battle, but also the so-called counter-offensive by Chiang Kai-shek forces and the alleged sinking of Japanese cruisers Kongo and Haruna were all the most low-class pieces of demagoguery indulged in by the declining Anglo-American camp. From Shanghai, the Australian War Minister, Mr. Francis Ford, speaking at the launching of an Australian destroyer, declared that things looked black for Australia and its allies in East Asia. A report reaching Shanghai from Sydney revealed Monday. The report discloses that Mr. Ford stated hopes for an early turn of events in Australia's favor in East Asia were in vain, and further setbacks must be expected in the near future. You are listening to a war bulletin from Tokyo. Somewhere in the Philippines, 15 enemy cannons, 7 tanks, and 11 military lorries were smashed Saturday by Japanese bombardment from land and air, smashing Japanese forays and offensives against the island fortifications in Manila Bay, and heavy aerial attacks on American positions in the Bataan Peninsula have disintegrated American defense armies. It was announced by the United States War Department. Next from Lisbon. Reports from Washington disclose that drastic reorganizations in the Allied Naval Command were announced close on the heels of it, indicating utter confusion and lack of cooperation among Allied leaders. The London correspondent of the Dutch colonial news agency, Anitas, reported to Lisbon Sunday that some surprise has been caused among Dutch circles in London by Sunday morning's publication from Washington regarding President Roosevelt's press conference statement. concerning various organs to be set up for the Allied conduct of the Pacific War. The correspondent disclosed that the Dutch refugee government has no possession of official communications regarding President Roosevelt's announcement, it was said. Nanking. Since the opening of the Greater East Asian War, the Chongqing regime is said to have concentrated a total of 310,000 men in the southwestern area. However, in view of the lightning offensive effected by the Imperial Japanese forces in Burma and Malay, Chongqing military leaders have suddenly begun to avoid combined operations with the Anglo-American forces, learning that such operations will be a virtual impossibility. And particularly after the Japanese occupation of the entire Malay area, the Chongqing army operating in the southern area has turned to a policy of defending its own territory, thus breaking up the British Chongqing operations. The total failure met by Chongqing in its general counter-offensive at the outbreak of the Greater East Asia War, as well as the fall of Hong Kong and Shanghai, have rapidly lowered the resistance power of the Chongqing forces. From the Changsha battle in September last year up to January this year, the Chongqing forces have lost 20% of their military power, with 103,000 dead bodies left on the battlefields, and more than 300,000 dead or wounded out of the total force engaged of 1,500,000. Furthermore, with the loss of a large quantity of arms, General Chiang Kai-shek is now greatly perplexed, a report from Nanking revealed. Next, on the war front in North China, crushing the Chongqing remnants under Yu Shui-chung in Ishui sector in the southern part of Shantung province, Japanese forces succeeded in shattering the enemy headquarters at Ta Tsing-wang, 25 miles north of Ishui, Saturday night. The Japanese are now vigorously driving from all directions toward Ishui to mop up the Chongqing remnants. Information available from Chinese sources reveal that losing all hopes in defending Burma, Britain asked the Chongqing army now in northern Burma to dispatch its reinforcements to the British positions in Burma. But despite Chongqing's acceptance of the request, no Chinese reinforcements have actually been sent. Worried about the situation, the British again and again requested the dispatch of Chinese troops for the defense of Burma. But the Chongqing army's replies were that in spite of the assurance that the British will supply weapons and ammunition to the Chinese upon their arrival, the supply is so scant and poor that the Chinese cannot meet the powerful Japanese forces. And therefore, if the British first send munitions and other necessary war materials, then the demanded reinforcements will be dispatched to assist the British. Thereupon the British said that they will adopt some measures to meet the demand of the Chongqing army, but urged them to send more troops immediately within their power. No answer has yet been received from the Chongqing army regarding this urge. Just as when Chongqing was asked to check the Japanese army in the rear at the time of the Hong Kong campaign, the Chongqing army seems to patch up the things for the moment by merely saying that they are now preparing for the dispatch of troops, since they know they cannot resist the crack Japanese troops. You are listening to news from Radio Tokyo. We continue with a dispatch from Saigon. A large-scale mass demonstration against the British government took place recently at Lahore, chief city in Punjab, India. The demonstration was quelled after 100 Indian leaders were arrested, according to an Australian radio report intercepted at Saigon Sunday. The riot at first started as a parade protesting against the new sales tax imposed by the British authorities as a wartime measure. However, the parade developed into a riot with the paraders later extending blows with the police authorities. The Australian radio broadcast disclosed, revealing that the disturbances were primarily directed against the British business establishments. Geneva. According to the Tangier paper, España, violent anti-British riots have occurred in Tangier, the international zone in Morocco. A violent explosion was caused when a suitcase belonging to a British official was dropped a bit too hard by mistake by a porter. As a result of this fatal mistake, 11 were killed and 36 wounded. According to the newspaper España, anti-British violence broke out as a consequence of this explosion incident. The paper España concluded by remarking, and we quote, "The natives are endeavoring to free their city from British gangster warfare," end quotation. It seems the sentiment against the British has been mounting during the past weeks, and with this latest incident, such resentment came out on the surface. Milan. British war prisoners were unanimous in declaiming that the British battleship Queen Elizabeth, 30,600 tons, had been put out of action by a torpedo hit when Italian mosquito boats raided the harbor of Alexandria. It was reported Sunday. The battleship Valiant, 30,600 tons, was also hit during the same attack and was seen listing heavily, the report added. Next from Vichy. The British Admiralty Sunday announced the loss of the 1,870 made into the health of 200,000 men and women workers in 50 principal munition factories in Britain, according to a report from Stockholm. The inquiry has revealed that 65 hours a week for men and 60 hours a week for women have considerably impaired their health, one person after another getting ill, and the British production of war supplies has been greatly hampered. In order to remedy this condition, it is considered unavoidable to shorten the working hours, the report from Stockholm said. And one more news item. Warning to the American public that the apprehension of vicious inflation is gradually increasing, the New York Herald Tribune reported that the prices of agricultural products in the United States have suddenly risen since the outbreak of the present hostilities in the Pacific. Comparing the present price index with that before the war, the New York paper reported that the price of raw cotton increased by 128%, while that of wheat rose by 97%, and corn and egg soared by 105 and 103%, respectively. That is the end of the news from Tokyo. End of the news from Tokyo. End of the news from Tokyo.